Dr. France Janov, Clinical Director of the Primal Center in Venice, California. Welcome.
Thank you. And by the way, Dr. France Janov.
Pardon me, Dr. France Janov, of course.
It was hard enough to get those two little letters.
You worked hard for your doctor. Doctorate. Yes. Okay, let's start there. So, yeah, you're the clinical director of the Primal Center, and clearly the Primal Center is a research center for primal therapy and a practicing therapy center. Some of our audience may have heard of primal therapy and associate it with primal screaming or something. Others won't have heard of primal therapy at all. What's primal therapy in a nutshell?
Well, since we were born, we may have had pain. Most people have had pain coming from the fact that they were not really loved. And love is such a big, big definition because it means that all our needs have to be fulfilled, starting before birth, during birth, and all throughout our growing up. And the needs, it sounds like it's a very easy thing, but it's not. It means that a baby and a child have to get what they need at the time they need it. That is really the definition of love, of being loved. In other words, when a child needs to be taken in his parents' arms, or fed, or go to bed and sleep, but it has to happen at the time that need comes up. And if it does not happen at that time, or it doesn't happen at all, then there is incredible pain coming in. And we cannot really see that pain from outside. It's not always obvious unless a child or a baby cries, but as we grow up, as the child grows up, it does not always show, because before it can even be felt by the child, it is repressed. Our brain throws up repression, and the baby or the child, or even later on, of course, the hurt is not felt. It is repressed, but it is registered. It usually, especially when it's a young child, the need is to be held, is to be caressed, is to be listened to be fed at the right time, to be able to go to sleep at the right time. All those needs may not be showing, and therefore they may not be fulfilled. And it does not necessarily show. Sometimes the baby cries, but otherwise it could be repressed before the baby or the child, or later on the adult, even feels it. But the need and the pain that occurs from the fact that need is not fulfilled, these are registered and they are inside our system forever, unless we feel it and we get it out of our system. And feeling it, I'm not sure if that's necessary to talk about it, but feeling it is what primal therapy does, where the patient feels what they did not have and the pain that occurred from not having had what they needed. And that pain is tremendous. We cannot imagine how strong and how bad it can be unless we feel it. And in order for us who are not doing the therapy to deal with it, is to repress it and to act it out. And act it out means that we become someone else, really, because we are constantly unconsciously, and that's important to know, unconsciously, we are avoiding that pain.
Okay.
So that's basically how it works.
Okay, so there are two elements of it. There's the acting out of the repression of that early pain, the acting out of it as a way to deal with it, and then there's the process for resolving it. And those are the two things you described. Have I got that right?
Well, the process to resolving it, there is only one. It is to feel the pain that was occurred by the lack of fulfillment of the need. That's what we do in primal therapy. And otherwise, it keeps, our system keeps trying to keep us away from the pain that is still there. See, when a child is not loved, he has to repress the need for love and he has to repress the pain that the non-fulfillment of love is creating in him or her. And so those two elements are part of their growing up, are part of every second of their lives. So, for example, people are not aware that they act out the pain. That's the way they are. That's the definition of neurosis. They are neurotic, but they don't even know they are neurotic in most of the cases. They just act out. They take drugs. They drink. They are angry. They are dismissive. All the things that neurosis makes us do.
Okay.
And consciously. And that's the main thing, is that that's who we become. That is the definition of neurosis. Is the person is neurotic because they keep avoiding a pain that is very, very, very old and very early. But by acting it out, then it doesn't have to be felt.
Okay.
And that is the definition of neurosis. And so the therapy, primal therapy, helps you feel that pain as a child so that you don't have to act it out, and you don't have to be, and little by little the neurosis comes down and you become who you really are without the pain and without to have to act it out or take drugs or drink or all that.
Okay, so it sounds there like that's a slightly broader definition of neurosis than perhaps some people have in their mind. I think perhaps some people think of I know this is stereotypical, but a neurotic woman who's perhaps very anxious. And so we perhaps have, given what you've said, a slightly narrow sense of what neurosis is. Is that you're talking about something broader? Is that right?
Yeah, it is. Neurosis is really the consequence of not having been loved, not having had our needs fulfilled. Then the fact that those needs have to be repressed at all times, and the pain from not having those needs fulfilled have to be repressed at all times, create that behavior which is neurotic, because it's a behavior that has nothing to do with who the person would have been had that person been loved since day one. And so, because it is meant to constantly suppress the pain of not having had our need fulfilled. So that is the definition of neurosis. It's all the things we have to do not to feel the pain.
All the things we have to do not to feel the pain. And that can include drugs, alcohol, pornography.
Exactly.
But it can also be perhaps what people more commonly think of, or sometimes think of, as neurosis, which is being anxious or being depressed as well.
Yes, but not only that, it makes us become somebody we are not. Because that pain is there all the time, and it is also constantly triggered in life. And our system has to immediately defend us so that we don't feel it. And then we can live with it being repressed. Now, people who take drugs, who have to drink, who have to do all those things, that's because their natural repressive system is not enough. They have to add more things so that they will not feel the pain. But basically, the essence of neurosis is the fact that we become someone else than whom we really are, so that we will not feel the pain that is being triggered or that would be triggered at every minute of our life by the lack of love, the old lack of love, and that is being triggered by the present lack of love.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So so it's probably worth unpacking that a bit. So when you talk about triggered, you've got a specific meaning there of being triggered, right? What explain that.
Yeah, being triggered is actually a very, very important notion, because if we look at the need, and I'm going to go all the way back, we need the need to be loved, the need to be taken in their arms, in the parents' arms, the need to eat or sleep when the baby needs it. And as we grow up, we pretty much are inside our parents' needs, what they want us to be, or what life is, that it may not be so easy. But in any event, in terms of neurosis, the needs are not being fulfilled, but they still exist. So they have to be repressed. And in order to be repressed, then besides drinking, smoking, doing all the crazy things, our system has been warped in such a way that since day one, when the needs were not fulfilled, our system has to immediately, repress the need, and has to put over it the way to deal with the need anyway, which is really what becomes neurosis. The need is still there, but we can't feel it and we can't fulfill it since day one. Therefore, there is a whole system that is in place that keeps us from feeling that need. And that is the essence of neurosis. We become someone else, basically.
Okay.
We become our defenses, the defenses that allow us not to feel the need and not to have the pain from the need not fulfilled.
Right. Okay.
Is that clear?
That's clear. And then the second part of what you've talked about there is the way to resolve this pain, this unmet need, is to go back and feel it. But what about the people out there who take a position of no? Well, there's a couple of arguments against that. One is the past is in the past. We need to move on. Another is, well, if we go back and feel all that, we will re-traumatize ourselves. And I suppose the third that I often hear is, oh, but if we go back, how do you know that's real? And maybe you're making it up, and there's this danger of these auto-suggestion, where we tell ourselves something bad happened when really it didn't. So how do you counter those arguments?
Okay, give me the first one first.
So let's take the first one. So let's take the first one, which is, let's just leave the past in the past and move on. It's futile to go back. We should just live our lives in the present and leave the past in the past.
Okay, that's a very good one. That's what most people do. What they're not aware of and what they don't know is that the past is the past, but it keeps pulling your behavior. It keeps driving your behavior in the present, because the past is full of pain. And our system systematically and automatically tries to avoid that pain. So by avoiding that pain, which is in the past, we have to have a behavior that is not the right, that is not, how can I say that? That is not driven by the past. And that is the essence of neurosis, is that we keep avoiding the past. We keep doing the things that will not get us close to the pain of the past, the pain of not having been loved, the pain of not having our needs fulfilled as a child. When the needs are not fulfilled as a child, if we are not taken in our parents' arms as much as we needed, if we're not listened to when we needed to be listened to, all of the things that we need as a child, and the needs as a child are gigantic, because everything comes from daddy and mommy. Nothing else, because a child can't do anything to fulfill his needs. So his whole life or her whole life are completely directed to being fulfilled by their parents. And if they're not, the definition of the need is that you need that to happen.
Right. And so what you're saying is that for those who say, "Oh, just leave the past in the past," you're saying, well, your past, you're still carrying your past. You'll continue to repeat these neurotic patterns.
Not only that, but you also have inside of you the pain. And that's what we can't even imagine how powerful that pain is of not having the need fulfilled. The need is the thing that is essential for you to be whole and for you to be happy and for you to be comfortable in your own skin. If that need is not fulfilled, then the pain is tremendously strong and powerful. But because it's so strong and powerful and that we cannot fulfill the need as a child, it is repressed.
Okay.
Otherwise,
and we have to go back. You have to go back to resolve it, and just living in the moment and looking towards the future will not allow us to resolve it. Is that what you're saying? Well,
no. What you have to do is that you have to feel the pain of the fact that those needs were not fulfilled. Okay. And people don't realize how extraordinarily powerful the need for love, and in love again, there's all the things, being listened to, being taken in the arms, to be cuddled, to be paid attention, all that. The need the need is an extremely powerful thing. It's just like, you don't feed someone when they die. Well, the need, the psychological need is the same in the sense that the real person dies or is buried under the pain of the need that is not being fulfilled. And that pain makes us, in order to avoid it, makes us constantly behave in a way that is away from the need itself. So in other words, someone who has not been loved can become angry, can do things that have nothing to do with who or she or he is really deeply. And that's called neurosis. And neurosis takes so many different aspects which come up and take their shape from the life, from the past, from the childhood pain. Mm-hmm. And it makes us to be someone completely different than who we really are. Because we live inside the defense not to feel the pain of not having been loved. Okay. And because that pain is inside of us. It is registered in our brain, in our neurons, in our physiology, in everything. And it drives our lives.
Right. And the second argument against it is, well, if you go back, you'll re-trauma. You open all that up and you'll re-traumatize yourself. And I see that written a lot online in critiques of primal therapy, is this risk of re-traumatizing yourself. What do you say to that?
That is actually, I can understand that people might think that, but what they do not understand is that the trauma comes from when you are a child. When you are an adult, you're much stronger. So you can cry because you were traumatized or you were hurt when you were a child. But by then, your constitution, your brain, your physiology is much, much stronger. And what is actually fascinating is that in primal, a deep primal usually lasts very shortly, 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes. But
shortly, I think some people would feel like that was a very long time when we consider a sort of typical therapy session.
What do you mean?
Well, 2 or 3 hours would perhaps feel like a long time for somebody who's used to having therapy sessions that are 40 minutes long, say.
Yeah, that's true, except that, when we cry, it is a release. And so in therapy, the fact that you cry in this and afterwards, the relief, the feeling of happiness, of being yourself, which does not happen right away. It takes a little while before this whole process takes hold. But when it does, when people have what we call a feeling, we don't call it always a primal, but when we have a feeling, it is an extraordinary thing. It's like all the pain comes out. And after that, the feeling of being alive, of being who you are and free of that pain is an extraordinary feeling. It's fantastic. It's like what it should have been had you not have had the pain, from your childhood. It's like suddenly it's out of your system. And when it is out of the system, you realize how impactful it had been, how it drove your life before, and how painful it is.
Mm. Okay.
And it is an extraordinary relief. And what I want to say is what is absolutely extraordinary about this process is that there is an amount of pain, let's say 200 is the amount of pain that is registered in our system, in our brain, in our body, everywhere. And in primal, we feel a little bit of it, and a little bit of it, and a little bit of it. And with every little bit that is felt, let's say 10, every time there is a relief until in the end, when the 200 have been felt, that's it. You have your life. You feel great. You're happy. The pain is not in you, dogging you or forcing you to try to avoid it all the time and act out. And act out means you're not yourself because you keep on trying to avoid that pain, unconscious pain, but it drives you, or drink or drugs or all the crazy things that we do in neurosis, because that is the definition of neurosis, avoiding that pain that is registered in us. Mm. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And then the third argument is that you often hear is that, well, how do we know it's real, right? How do we know we're not sort of making things up and that we're we're kidding ourselves that we had certain traumatic experiences, and there's this risk of trauma or abuse that we think happened and really didn't happen, and that's a big risk for people taking this type of process.
If it did not happen, you can't cry about it. It's that simple. If it did not happen, you're not hurt. And if you're not hurt, you don't cry about it. See, that's the thing that is so real in Primal. Is like, let's take an example. Someone is unpleasant with you and is treating you badly and all that. Well, if you haven't done Primal, you're stuck with that in the present. So you get a headache, you take pills, you're angry, whatever you do to avoid actually feeling it. If you have access to your feeling, which is what Primal gives you, you go lie down, as we call it, and then you let yourself feel it. You may be angry at that person, and under the anger, by the way, there's always a hurt. So you can be angry at first, or maybe not, if you can go directly to the feeling of hurt. And when you hurt, you cry, and you feel the hurt deeply, and that cannot be faked. If you feel the hurt deeply, you let yourself feel the hurt deeply in the present already. You know, someone was very unpleasant and treated you badly, and it makes you cry. By the way, tears contain endorphins, which is what we need to deal with. That's what happens, that allows us to be better afterwards. But so we feel it, we cry, and you can't cry unreal. If you really cry because you've been hurt, it's real. You have been hurt, and that's what our system gives us to be able to feel better. And in Primal, it starts in the present. It may start in the present, and then the same feeling takes you to what we call second line, which is the same feeling in the past. And that is really the essence of Primal Therapy. And if it goes to first line, which is birth, that is also, once people have achieved enough access to their pain, and if there was problems, if there were pain in first line, then it goes there automatically, and we are able to feel all those levels of pain on the same, very often with the same feeling. Like someone has been feeling alone, very alone in life, right now in the present, and they start feeling it. I feel so alone all the time, nobody likes me, I'm alone, and we help them feel it. And then that aloneness, sort of pieces of the aloneness as a child in the past will start coming up, the memory of it. So I remember when I went to class the first time, I was so alone, nobody talked to me, and That feeling, it comes up and travels as we gain access. That's what we call it in Primal. That feeling travels through many, many times when it was actually felt without being felt, when it happened. Like, moments when the child feels alone in class, moments where the child feels alone because his parents are paying more attention to his brothers or sisters. All the possibilities of feeling alone in their life starts coming up, not all at once, but that's the process of Primal Therapy. It will start little by little. And the difference between having it registered and lingering and being inside the system, the fact that they are felt is coming out of the system, and therefore does not drive us into a behavior that will make us avoid that feeling.
Right.
Is that, I'm not sure if I'm clear on that.
No, that's clear. I can just imagine some people listening to this and maybe they're like, maybe I can buy that we can go back and feel feelings from childhood. But birth, come on, can we really remember that? I'm sure some people may be thinking that.
And I tell you what, birth is actually the most important part, because birth is life and death. The baby is coming to life. It has no defenses unless, the 9 first months have not been so good, which quite often happens. But in fact, it is the beginning of life. And it is a beginning that can be very traumatic because, again, birth does not always happen very easily. Sometimes the doctor is not ready, so the baby has to stay inside for longer than when his birth. Birth is an extraordinary thing because the baby actually gives the signals of, I am ready to be born now. It comes from the baby. And it's very important because it's the first manifestation of the life for the baby. It needs to be coming out. And if the doctor is not ready to come, if the mother is very afraid and she does not let it happen, if she's taking drugs, all the circumstances that make it difficult and that interfere with the completely natural process of birth. It's like there's nothing more powerful than a baby that is ready to come to life. And for example, in a lot of places, a lot of countries, in a lot of places, the mother is automatically drugged because they don't want her to suffer. Well, whatever is injected in the mother goes into the baby, much more powerful because obviously, the baby is completely new and doesn't have any defenses in that area yet, and it changes everything.
Right.
I'm going to give you my example. I know it's not really great to do that, but it is such an amazing one. It was war in Paris, and the Germans were occupying France. And when my mother needed to have me born, she could not because she had to go to the hospital, and the Germans were anyway. So they had to hold me back. And in my life, I started dying inside of her, but something in me refused to die, and I would start again, pushing to get born, but I could not. So I would fall down again in unconsciousness. But again, something in me refused to die, and I would fight again, etc., etc. And this lasted for hours. And I never knew how it impacted my life. And it took me a few years of feelings and feeling that I almost died, and I made myself live again to finish that whole sequence of ready to be born, can't be born, fight to be born, and each time I would fall, because I could not make myself be born. And it created an absolute pattern in my life. Nobody and nothing can keep me from doing what I want. And it is so powerful. It has driven my life completely. It has made me very successful, which is nice. But whenever I could absolutely not do what I wanted, then I would try committing suicide. That's how powerful it was. So it is. And when I actually went to that sequence in Primal, I could not even believe it. And my immediate instinct when I could not do what I wanted was the idea of committing suicide. And I did it a few times. And I spent 4.5 days, in hospital and things like that. So, and I know it damaged me in some ways, but all it was, and when I started having those primals, then I realized the impact, the incredible impact it had on my life. Not being able to be born, practically dying, and then having something in me that refused to die, fight, and finally I made it to be born. I mean, I'm sure it sounds crazy. Does it?
Well, yeah. I mean, of course, I'm biased in this because I've done a lot of primal therapy myself and have experienced my own birth, and so I have a perspective which allows me to believe that this is absolutely true. But I still encounter on a regular basis people in my life who are very skeptical of the idea that we could go back and feel what we felt in birth and relived it. And I'm just interested to know how you respond to that challenge of, well, how can you possibly remember it? It sounds like you've got
people have to understand that, we're not, everything that happens to us is registered. And especially at the beginning of life, because our brain, our system is completely new and completely virgin. Nothing has been registered yet. And life and death, nothing can be more powerful than that. When things don't go right at birth, then obviously it has the potential of being life and death. So the whole system is already fighting and is already traumatized, and everything is already registered and creates equations of failure or success.
Yeah, and that's what Arthur Janov, and of course we'll perhaps come on to him, but described as an imprint.
Absolutely, exactly. It's our first equation, it's our first imprint, and then we live on it. And whether it was successful or not, that imprint is what the system learns, because that's what happens, and that's how we learn to survive, is through all our imprints.
Those set points, that pattern that for you was set up very powerfully as, I will prevail no matter what, right? And for me was something like I must hang on with something like that from my birth experience, but they set up beliefs and patterns of behavior from those early moments.
Absolutely, because it is survival. What was your birth like?
Well, it was horrific.
You don't feel like answering it.
No. So I experienced something called fetal bradycardia, which is where your heart rate drops. So it's quite similar experiences. The doctors were concerned that that my heartbeat was dropping and that I might die. I was stuck in the birth canal, and they used forceps to pull me out. And and I was stuck in, and well, this is another term that's used commonly in primal, in a double bind, in the sense that for me to push out,
of course,
was dangerous because I was losing energy by pushing.
Yeah.
Right, and my heartbeat was dropping, and I was low on energy, and so to push out was dangerous, and yet to not push, to stay would also have meant death. So to push was to risk death, and to not push was to risk death, which we did describe as a double bind. And of course it manifested me as a very strong personality trait of being tentative, being neutral, playing things down the middle all the time. And so it manifested in this, in some senses, allowed me to be very successful in types of roles where I needed to play a kind of ambassadorial role, where I needed to be fair to both sides. But it held me back in many ways, because it meant that I was very tentative when it came for just going straight for something, because of course from my birth experience, to do that would have been to have risked death. So it was very powerful for me to not just understand all that, but resolve it, because it gives me facility to act differently, to believe different things. So yes, of course for me it was enormously powerful.
When I listen to you, because it is fascinating, we should write a book from everybody who had a birth trauma in any way, and write the book about what it did, the consequences of it.
Right, and maybe with enough testimonies, it could make an impact in terms of countering that very common belief that we can't remember any of that, and or it's not. There's no point going back there. Let's move on. Which is such a strong cultural narrative for us.
Yeah, of course, and which has to do with birth too. But anyway, that would be very, very interesting to do. Yeah. Because I'm sure can't even imagine how much their life depends on the way their birth happened. They have no idea.
Well, exactly. It was hidden for me. I had absolutely no vague inkling whatsoever. I think I somehow knew in the back of my mind that I had a difficult birth, but I never got even close to connecting that with any of the problems I was experiencing, or anything to do with, or any of the facets of my personality. It just were never connections I made.
Of course, and because first you don't have access to it, but actually, if you think about it, it makes such sense. That is the first experience that a baby has, and obviously he's going to learn, because it's life and death, or difficulty and success. And so obviously it's going to learn these equations.
Yeah, no, yeah, I can see that.
So that
a crowdfunded book of birth experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be so interesting. Plus, you would not even have to write it. Other people would write it. They would write their experience.
The book of pain. I think trying to market it might be interesting. But yeah, no, I can totally see the value of it for people. As a project.
Yeah, and actually, all we have to do is ask the people in Primal.
Right. Yeah.
Tell you the equations,
and
how they discovered it.
Exactly. But coming back very briefly to sort of Primal as an edifice, obviously it's something that you and I have had very powerful experiences with, and I'm sure we could name dozens of other cases. But in terms of its sort of traction and impact in society, it's not made the progress certainly that I would have liked. From my experience, I'd love this to be more commonly accepted in terms of what it can offer people. In 2006, the American Psychological Association listed it as a discredited therapy, and I know all of the obituaries of Arthur Janov's passing relatively recently were all kind of mixed and generally sort of negative in tone. So how do you feel about that, and why do you think that's the case?
Well, obviously, I think it's a great shame because a lot of people could be helped and are not because they've heard bad things about it. I think part of the problem was that so many people tried to make themselves primal therapists and they had no idea what they were doing. And I think that is true all over the world. I saw that in France when art were there. I see it in a lot of countries, and that's a shame because they make people scream or crazy stuff. So that contributed to discrediting primal. So I'm not really sure how to change it. That's why I did the legacy program so that people would have a chance to see how it's supposed to be done.
What's that? The legacy program for people who? Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
What is the legacy program for people who are not familiar with that?
Well, the legacy program is when I was doing training at the Primal Center. It was taped. The videos were taped, and it is really ABC of primal therapy how to do it.
Okay.
And so it's there. I believe there's maybe something like 40 or 30 evenings are taped, and it's available at the center. And we have it actually on the website as well. But I'm surprised how it does not sell more because it's really a complete course of how to do primal therapy the right way.
Right.
So it's called the Primal Legacy Program. It's on the website as well. I mean, the link to it.
And that's more targeted at therapists, is it? People who want to learn how to do this as a therapist, as a practitioner, or is it for just people who want to use it themselves as a DIY technique?
Well, it's a course in primal therapy. So okay. the people who do want to know how to do the therapy, whether it's for themselves or to do it on other people, they just buy it. And okay. I made it very cheap. And we do sell it, but not that as many as I would have think. Okay. That people, who are interested in primal, it's all there. It's really, I think I did 2 years of training or something like that. All of primal therapy in that program. And that's it, really. What was your question?
I suppose it reflects the broader point that we're making here, that it just hasn't taken off. Despite its apparent power and what it's done for me in terms of transforming my life and you and many, many others, it's not gained traction, and perhaps the sales of the legacy program just reflect that. So, what's the core, or maybe I'm sure there's multiple issues, but what do you see as being the primary drivers of the fact it's not taken off to the extent we might have expected it to?
Well, what I think is that people who decided to do primal therapy, whether they were already therapists or not, they did it. Oh my God, this is great! I make my patients scream, and then they'll get better. And I think a lot of that at the beginning, especially, give Primal a bad name or did not represent what it is, because we heard it so often that the therapists were making the patient scream. And when Art and we opened the institute in Paris, there were already a lot of therapists doing it in Germany, and some of them came to us to learn or to see how it was supposed, just to learn more. And we were horrified when we heard the stories of how they were doing it. And I'm afraid that's a lot of what happened, is that they say, oh yeah, and also the title, Primal Scream. They made their patients scream and hit the board and get angry and do all sorts of crazy stuff. And I'm sure it's still true. And after a while, it contributed to giving Primal a bad name, that it does not resolve, it doesn't help, whatever. I don't know.
So a lot of rogue practitioners. But I mean, I know the other thing that Art used to talk about was that perhaps it was that at an individual level, we don't want to hear the message that to get better, we've got to feel pain. And I think there must be something evolutionary. There must be an evolutionary rationale for that. I mean, there would have been times for us that it would have been threaten our survival to spend hours and hours crying and feeling all pain and not being functional and productive. And actually there would have been a survival imperative for us to repress and suppress pain in order to maintain functionality in the world.
You're absolutely right. Yes, no question. So all these things contributed to not helping the popularity, if I can say, of Primal. And at the same time, I see that we never advertise the Primal Center or anything like that, and people keep coming. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, I think it's for those who, for better or worse, have opened that door to their pain and have got some intuition that continuing to feel it may help improve their lives and discover the primal therapy and other deep feeling therapies as an access to going deeper and truly resolving some of the issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's just a small proportion right now of the global populace who are in that place, and I think can afford to do it in terms of the money it costs. If you want to do it with therapists, and the time that's required to take time. I mean, in my primal journey, if you want to call it that, I've had to take a lot of time off work, and obviously I'm in a very privileged position where I can do that, and not everybody can. Not everybody can go part-time for years on end to process old pain. So
it's true that it's hard to make it attractive. But what I found, by the way, and I see this more and more with our patients as well, the current is that after 2 years, basically, the therapy has been done well, and if the access has been well drawn, well created, after 2 years, you don't need formal therapy anymore. I mean, obviously, it's not an exact assessment, 2 years, and that's it. But what I see very much is that people who've done their therapy and done it well, gain access and do that, and not act out, do what needs to be done. After 2 years to maybe 3, they just feel on their own. They feel, oh, okay, I'm triggered. They know they're triggered, and so they go lie down. They feel it, and it's gone. And I find that an extraordinary thing, because the process goes on, but the necessity of having a therapist, of going to a place and doing all that, is no longer necessary most of the time if we have gained good access.
Yeah, I mean, I've found that I got to the point with my primal experience where I didn't have to keep coming to California and having the in-person sessions, and I now have it regularly with Skype, and I'm sure I progress even without the Skype therapy sessions, but there's something for me that's been powerful about keeping a drumbeat of a therapy session. Again, I'm privileged that I can do that, but it has meant that, it's for me, I suppose it's nearer 10 years that I've continued to do the work. But
well, yeah, if there is a lot of pain, obviously, they might still come up and it still needs to be felt. But there is no necessary therapy with a therapist in a room and all that stuff, is there? Do you still need that?
I don't think I need it, but for me, it's need it per se. I think it's a bit like having a personal trainer, right? I could go to the gym by myself and work out and do a pretty good job, but I'm never going to get as deep in therapy by myself as I would as a therapist. The same way, I'm not going to work out quite as hard by myself as I would with a personal trainer. So that's the way I relate to it. But there's no doubt that I have the capability now to and do process on my own, outside of therapy sessions and so on. So you talked before about how this, working yourself through primal therapy has allowed you to resolve these issues in terms of suicide attempts and this big reaction when you got thwarted. But what else has it given you?
Yeah, when you live with pain and then some even little pain is added in your life, then it becomes too much and you don't want to live, i.e. suicide attempt, etc. But mostly what it gives me after all is that first you have a great understanding of who you are, and that I find to be absolutely amazing. You're not a mystery to yourself. You don't react in a way that you do not understand. You do know who you are, and that I find absolutely fantastic because it's a natural thing. You don't react in a way that you don't understand. You don't. You know exactly who you are, and that allows you to make the real choices. The choices that are going to make your life fulfilling and that you're going to enjoy, because it is not a neurotic need. It is not a neurotic something that keeps you from feeling the pain. The pain has been felt, so all the choices that you make are real, and therefore they make you happy. I mean, those two elements are so important. The first one is that you're not in pain. You get up in the morning and you can look at the sky and that makes you happy. You can look at your flowers and you enjoy it. It's like all the good things in your life have a weight in terms of pleasure, in terms of making you feel good. So that's the first thing. And the second, you're not plagued by neurosis. You're not plagued by pain. And very important, actually, that's the third, you make the decisions that are right for your life. You don't make decisions in order to stay away from the pain, in order to deal with pain, in order to not feel pain. Besides the fact that you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't do all those crazy things are also bad for you. But even if you did not before, and it makes no difference after, but the choices that you make are the real choices. Therefore, they make your life being what it's supposed to be. They make your life to be totally happy because that's what you really needed, if not for the pain. And that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. I remember you told me that this metaphor came from you that primal is, it's like you've got this bathtub of pain and it's like emptying the bathtub with a teaspoon.
Yeah.
And that was actually, so at one level I was like, oh my God, I've got an entire bathtub to empty. But on the other hand, it was like, okay, well, I've got reason to keep going. And then the final point is eventually the bathtub does become empty. And it sounds like you've reached that place or close to that place.
Oh, I have. Yeah. I haven't had to have a feeling or to feel pain for over 10 years.
Yeah.
And sometimes I even think, is it that much? Well, actually, it's maybe more. It's like after a while, when Art was talking about the pool of pain, is that what he was calling it?
It's true. No, this came from you, right? But yeah, maybe you'd
I was him. But anyway, yeah, there is a certain amount of pain, and it's mathematic. Every time we feel a piece of it, well, it's not there. And in fact, nature gives us the possibility of crying. And that's what we restore, is that possibility that cleans up and that takes out the pain. That's why we cry. And I find it totally extraordinary. And what I found extraordinary when I was doing it too, is that you actually go back to the moment and you are again the child or the person that was in that moment when the pain was there. That too I find extraordinary, that we actually revisit in real the moment that gave us the pain.
Yeah.
I think it is an extraordinary thing, and I'm sorry so many people are in pain, and I have a few people around me that are completely in pain that spend their lives acting out, and they know me and I've given them the book sometimes, but they don't do it. And I want to say, you are a fool. You're a fool to choose your neurosis over some feelings, and then after that, having a great life.
Right. So
but it's their choice.
Absolutely, and not everybody's going to is going to move in this direction. For those, so we've talked a lot about how a lot of neuroses, as we've defined it, gets set up in early life, in our early experiences and unmet needs. What advice do you have for parents out there? I'm a parent of young twins. I know you've got an adopted son, right? But yeah, what's your advice for parents?
Well, pay attention to their need and fulfill their need. That's the definition of love.
Mm.
And obviously, it's not that easy because, if parents have pain of their own, they have neurosis, and they see everything through their neurosis. So that's why I feel it's difficult to give advice, because it's an advice that lives inside who they are. And if they have pain, if they have neurotic needs or neurotic reactions, they're not going to be able to change that all the time. But supposing that we can extract that aspect to it, I think the advice is be very aware of what your child needs. Read Dr. Janov's books, like The Feeling Child, to have an idea about what the need of a child is. And then after that, just fulfill the child's needs, provided you can identify them. Right. But mostly listen to them, kiss your children, be with them, be attentive to what they want. In my family, which was like high bourgeoisie, we were supposed to be behaving in a way that was proper. And that's it. Nothing else mattered. So that meant that the real needs, there was a huge barrier between my parents and us, which was made of behavior you were supposed to have, etc., etc. You could not cry. That was not allowed, etc. So I think the main recommendation is be aware of your children's need and fulfill them. If you can see that they need to talk to you, take the time to listen to them. If you can see that they are unhappy because something happened in school, find out what it is. Listen to them. Take them in your arms. I mean, it's all those things that in Primal seem to be so totally obvious, but that are not in life. I have friends who are very good people and they have children. They never really pay attention to what the kid has to say because they're busy with other things. They don't ever take them in their arms. They don't, it's awful. It's awful. And they're very good people. But they don't realize that's what a child needs because they did not have it.
Okay. So the message there is, at least part of your message there is, it's hard for parents to recognize a need in a child if they didn't get that need met themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Or if the child shows the need, but they are busy. And, life is tough for most people, and or they work a lot, or they're not there during the day, and all those things. Then it is not surprising about the amount of neurosis and how spread it is, because life is difficult too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm experiencing that myself with all of the awareness I have of what we've been talking about. I still leave the house and go to work, and yeah.
Of course. You have children, Richard?
Yeah, exactly. I have twin boys, 13 months.
Wow. Oh, 13 months.
Yeah.
Well, that's very exciting. That must be fascinating.
Well, it is fascinating, and I mean, it's awesome in so many ways. And of course, having this awareness just brings another layer of complexity for me in terms of how do I manage the fact I know what nurturing behavior can be and what non-nurturing behavior can be, and so how do I deal with getting their needs met as much as I possibly can, and be functional in life and earn money and do all the other things I need to do. It's
of course.
I mean, all parents, of course, face that. It's just
yeah, of course.
through
it's not
what
easy
I've been
in our day and age. There is no question.
It's just given me another dimension having gone through what I've gone through. Okay.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm sure I don't have to say that, but what I know, what I've seen also in Primal with our Primal patient is how important it is, the touching and the cuddling and all that. That's one of the dimensions that will immediately make the child feel better and feel loved.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But you have to have the time and all these things. It's I chose not to have children because I thought that maybe what if I can't give them the love that they need?
Yeah, I can understand why that's difficult.
Yeah. But and I love children. I love all my friends' children. That's great. And then they pack them up and they take them home.
Yeah, and of course you've contributed enormously indirectly with all of the parents you've worked with themselves, like me, for example. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a nephew who became our son, and that was great. That was wonderful. He's the one who said, "Hey, let's adopt him." So that was great.
Yeah, and I know we haven't really gone deep into your late husband and Arthur Janov, and obviously the founder of all this. We focus very much on your journey. Yeah, I mean, maybe we leave that for. I mean, that feels like that could be an entire show talking about his life and your experiences with art and so on. But
of course. Anytime if you want to, I'll be there. I love to talk about him. And you know what? I am very psychotic in that area because I still live with him.
Right.
He's with me every second of the day and the night. And I know it's not totally right in many ways, but I don't care. I will forever.
Well, and I'm sure that a lot of people, not as intensely as you obviously experience it, but I mean, he's certainly a figure in my life, and I'm sure he's a huge presence in a number of people's lives, even after his passing.
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh yes. Yeah.
I've got another practical question here. So, for people who perhaps aren't ready to commit to starting therapy, or even buying a book or buying the course you've described, is there anything practical that helps people sort of warm up for this path or start to get a sense of what it's like to feel at this level or to work in this way on themselves? Is there something practical people can be doing?
Well, I'm not sure. The best thing they can do is read the books.
Right.
Because nothing else will really explain as well. And the primal scream is, that's the one thing, like the first page already made me, oh my God, we are creatures of needs. Oh, we have needs. In my family, the need was to behave in the way my parents wanted. But I think the best thing to do is read out books. I really do. And to start with the primal scream. And then another one, which I find to be extremely important, is the feeling child.
The feeling child and primal scream. Okay, well, we'll put links to those in the description.
Yeah, because they are the ones that really touch on the subject of love and the need for love and what it means and what it is. What is love? So I think these two. Then of course all the others are very interesting, the Primal Revolution and all those books. But in terms of wanting to learn about feelings and stuff like that, I think those two are the most significant, Primal Scream and actually I've been thinking that I want to read the Primal Scream again. I have one here, and the Primal Revolution, because just to see how, now that I know what it is, obviously, to see how Art talked about it.
Right. Okay.
How he explained it, how he made it very clear what it is.
Right. Okay.
You know, that first line in the Primal Scream, we are creatures of needs, that changed my life. I remember looking at it and saying, I have needs? Well, it seemed to me I lived in my parents' needs to be what they wanted me to be. But that I had needs, that was a revelation. Yeah. And I never forgot that sentence. We are creatures of need. Yeah, indeed.
Okay, so
indeed.
my final closing question, Dr. France Janov,
Yes.
to you, what does it mean to be human in a sentence?
In a primal sense or in a general sense?
In a general
sense. Yeah?
In a general sense.
I think that being human, what it means is to be able to feel life, to be able to enjoy what's good about life, to be able to, when it's not good, because it's not always good for everybody, maybe to be able to feel what it does to you.
I think that's
human. That's a major. It's a big question.
It's a big question, but that's a great answer. To feel life. Let's bank that. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your time. As I say, we'll put the links to the books you've mentioned. I'll leave you to a beautiful Palm Springs day with the birds in your garden. Jealous.
Yes. Do you ever come around here?
From time to time. So I'd love to head out there sometime and check out your garden.
Yeah, please let me know. Come in. I'm here every day. So be sure to find me, and it will be a pleasure.
Okay.
And thank you for your time. And it was a very interesting interview. I hope I answered most things in a meaningful way.
Absolutely.
And where is it going to be showing? Where is it going to be published or whatever? So I can read it.
iTunes. So the podcast on iTunes is called Being Human, and we'll have a YouTube channel also, Being Human. So those are the places to check it out.
Okay, Being Human. I'll check it out on iTunes, right?
Being Human.
Being Human. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for your time, Dr. France Janov. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. It was a great pleasure.